team. So the first question this morning comes from Oliver. He's a Year 8 pupil at Valley Gardens Middle School.
How can the local police force keep all the residents safe when there are less police in operation?
Thank you, Oliver. So the question is, how can the local police force, Northumbria Police, keep everybody safe when there are fewer police in operation in a time of austerity and cutbacks? And obviously it would seem fair to start with Sergeant Brady.
Hi, Oliver. That's a really good question. I'll do the boring bit first and put it in a little bit of context for you. So, since 2011 or 2010, there's been a 30% cut in the amount of money that the police get, so the amount of resources we get to what we can then do. So over that period of time, Northumbria Police itself has lost £142 million that we can then spend to look after yourselves. It's been a huge challenge. We've had to do a lot of different things to try and cope with that. So some of those things, we had money in the bank, so financial reserves, we've used those up. We've had to streamline some of our departments, so make them smaller and put officers into different departments. Our estate, so you've got the school that you go to, we've got different police officers and police stations around the force. We've had to shrink that. So in a lot of areas, we've hubbed. So where there might have been 4 police stations, there's now 1 larger police station, and we're policed from there. There's been redundancies, unfortunately, so as well as police officers within the force, we have police staff that support us and do things that you might not necessarily see because you see police officers on the street, but you won't see like the back office and what happens there. So unfortunately, we've had to reduce the numbers there. And we've had a reduction in officers as well. So there's now, since 2010, we've lost 1,038 police officers from the front line. We've also reduced the number of police community support officers, as well as I say, a number of reductions in staff. But that doesn't mean we can't keep you safe. So for the force, our priorities are looking at vulnerability, our investigations and problem solving. So we've had to change a lot of things that we do, and I'll explain some of how we now police, because it has had a change and it's ever changing and evolving as things move on. So if you ring the police, you ring through to the control room, and every instance assessed by the call taker. So they use a model called the Thrive model, which is quite complicated, but in basic terms, we look at the threat, what the harm of the incident that you're ringing is, what the risk might be from that incident, so what's the chance of that harm occurring. We then look at what the investigative opportunities are. Very importantly, we look at what the vulnerability is around that. So is that particular person that's ringing in vulnerable? Are there vulnerabilities to other members of the community because of whatever that incident is? And then the E is sort of any extras, so any other things we can think of. The incidents are then graded. So if it's an emergency, you'll get an emergency response, so the police will come out. And it's the 999 response, it'll be blue lights. If it's not an emergency, then things are dealt with slightly differently. So in the past, where you would always get the police come out, if you ring the police 99.9% of the time, you would get the police come out. There's not enough of us to do that every time now. So that assessment is how we decide who's going to get a police officer attending at the door, if it's really urgent, or there's other ways now that we have to deal with things. So we have the immediate response, which I've spoken about. The response cops also have a scheduled car, so it's like a diary appointment system. So I would say to you, right, we don't need to come out and speak to you right now, but are you free at 6 o'clock tonight, and we'll come and speak to you then, and we can do that. There's also a diary car, which is not a diary car. So the car, they come out, there's a department called Resolution Without Deployment. So that'd be an officer that phones you and discusses the matter with you over the phone. So, for example, if you've had your car broken into, in the past we would always send somebody out to that. These days, sometimes we won't. And the reasons behind that are, I've been to lots of jobs like that, but if I go out to you and you're the victim, you've probably already spoken to your neighbours and asked if anybody's seen or heard anything. You've probably already asked them if they've got any CCTV, which are the inquiries that we as an officer would do at the scene. Well, you've done that for us, so why are we going to come out and then do that again? If we speak to you and there's inquiries to go on from that, we might then send an officer out at a separate time. Does that make sense? Okay, so there's also neighbourhood teams, which is what I'm part of. So the neighbourhood teams, we're visible in the community, we're out and about, we'll come into the schools, we'll go to local youth groups. So we have chats with themselves in similar forums to this about antisocial behaviour and things like that. And then there's a lot of other stuff that the police historically have done that really isn't a policing issue. So things that might be a council issue, so fly tipping and things like that. So it's been a little bit robust in handing things back to other partners that should be dealing with things rather than the police being the stopgap for everything. It's important that we look after you, and if you ring and it's an emergency, we will turn up. But things are changing and we can't turn up every time. But if you need to speak to somebody, you'll always get to speak to somebody.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Brody. Councillor Hodson, sat next to Sergeant Brody. We're obviously looking at age of austerity. What's your response to this question?
I think the answer to the question is with great difficulty. I think the police have got some real problems here. We had a talk from the Northumberland Police Commissioner, Dame Vera Baird, a few weeks ago. She came and spoke to the council, and she had a few interesting points to make, I think. She made the point that her police budget has been reduced, and this would result in a reduction in the number of police officers that we see in the force. She also made the point that nevertheless, she expected to maintain a high level of police performance. We've heard what that means. But thirdly, she explained that her police funding came mostly from the government, with only a small amount from local councils. And elsewhere in the United Kingdom, local councils made a greater contribution, and I thought she meant by that perhaps local councillors up here could do more to contribute to her budget. The Mayor may have something to say about that. Last year, North Tyneside Council had a budget surplus of £700,000, which is a lot of money, and was able to increase its reserves by 7 million this year, an even larger sum of money. So there does seem to be some money available should Dame Vera need that to help the police. Finally, my view is that sufficient police officers are required in order to maintain law and order. I hope police budget discussions with local councils can ensure a fully funded and adequate police service takes place in the future.
Thank you, Councillor. So, Norma, should the council be subsidising the police?
Well, I think the council, like every other public service, has suffered greatly in the cuts in the last few years. And the last few years have had to lose £110 million. In the next few years coming, we'll have to find £45 million, I think it is. So that 700,000 that Councillor Howson was talking about has gone into a contingency fund to help to meet those needs there. So as far as we're concerned, we work very, very closely with the police. And life has been very, very difficult for the police, don't get me wrong. Same as it's been difficult for our council to continue with some of the services we have to deliver. However, I want to reassure you that according to all the research and all the evidence we have, you live in one of the safest boroughs in the country. So that's quite reassuring. On the other hand, that we as a council try to play our part in keeping the borough safe. I mean, quite recently, we had a lot of complaints from residents about antisocial behaviour, about dog fouling, you know, that irritate people, and about litter all over the place. So we took the step quite recently to buy a CCTV van that goes around the borough to try to get evidence to help the police that when we need to actually get these people and find them for their bad behaviour, it's easier. But at the same time, we've employed a team of wardens that work early in the morning, late in the evening and weekends, because at those times there was nothing going on where we could actually stop or actually catch people making our borough so untidy and horrible place to live in. And I think the police have quite lately had to deal with different kinds of crime. I mean, some of the crimes that have just come to on the horizon were child sexual exploitation. You'll have read quite a lot about that. And they've also had cybercrime. And it seems to me that they've had to find ways of training officers that you already have, not being able to find new officers to deal with that. And they've had to train other people to help them deal with that. And they've been training people at one time, the community officers that go out there have been having some training now to help you to do that as well, which at one time they didn't do that. Is that true? Yeah. So I think they are doing quite a lot to make it possible that we have a safe borough to live in. But make no bones about it, it is extremely difficult. But I want to reassure you that in the borough, we have CCTV cameras right across the borough, both the police and the council, and they're monitored 24/7. So every minute of every day, somebody's being watched right across the borough. There's also the opportunity for our security teams to speak directly to the police 24/7, so they can get straight on if they notice anything, see something happening, it's immediately picked up by the police. So I just want to say to you that you too can help us by saying to your parents and yourselves and your pals, don't leave anything lying around in cars and such places. Right? Make sure that when you go out that your houses are secure and sort of so not sort of tempting people to come in and actually commit crime. So I just want to say thank you to the police, right? Because at the end of the day, they are doing a grand job under very, very difficult circumstances. And we will continue to work very closely, as we always do, with Sergeant Brady. And I have to tell you, Sergeant, if I had the money, I would give you tomorrow. There's no way that we have money to give you at the moment. We are struggling to meet our statutory duties. But Oliver, I think that's a great question. Well done. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, panel members. I think the key message there, of course, is that we do live in one of the safest boroughs in the country. We're very fortunate in that respect. Oliver, you asked that question, going about, enjoying your life here on North Tyneside. Do you feel safe out and about?
Yes, definitely.
And what about all the young people here? Show of hands. Do you feel safe when you're out and about? Well, that's great.
It's nice to know. Yeah.
Who feels unsafe when they're out and about? Okay, well, that's really reassuring. That's really good to see. Thank you, panel members.